Hi guys, I have received my very first Pz.II J replay, so thank you very much to venomkiller for sending this one in, and because it's my very first Pz.II J replay, I thought I would spend some time talking about the tank, because this tank is extremely rare. It is very, very rare, but it is starting to become a little bit more common as people pick them up on eBay. So previously, the only way you could get your hands on a Pz.II J was to get the special limited edition boxed set of World of Tanks that was only on sale in Russia and the Ukraine. But enterprising individuals are snapping up those box sets and making them available on eBay for a very, very, very princely sum. So you'd be looking at maybe anywhere between 250 to 400 euros or dollars to pick one of these tanks up on eBay. Now, it's one of two rare tanks. The other rare tank from the same method of purchasing it is the BTSV, and I have included BTSV replays on the channel before, but as I say, this is my very first Pz.II J replay, and thank you very much to venomkiller for sending it in. So I'm going to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about this tank and tell you why it is so scary. Now, the reason the Pz.II J is a scary tank is a combination of things. One, it's a tier 3 tank, so that means that a lot of the tanks that are going to be facing a Pz.II J will not have very powerful guns. Some will, but quite a lot of tanks it's going to be facing are not going to be able to hurt it. Another advantage the Pz.II J gets that makes it overpowered is the fact it's a tier 3, and a lot of the players it's going to be fighting against are inexperienced and don't know anything about weak spots. But because the tank is so rare, even when it does come up against experienced players, those experienced players may end up struggling and may end up dying to a Pz.II J simply because they're not used to fighting them, or they're used to fighting and shooting at weak spots, and the weak spots are very, very troll on this tank. What you think are weak spots actually aren't. But the main reason this tank is such a monster at tier 3 is definitely its armor. Now, if we come into the collision model, we can see, let's turn off, oh, well, okay, it's on, but you can see that this tank is incredibly well armored frontally and even has spaced armor. So a lot of heavily armored tanks usually have a weak turret or a strong turret, weak hull, but that's not the case for a Pz.II J. Frontally, this thing is incredibly well armored, and not only is it incredibly well armored, it has spaced armor. But let's hide that spaced armor for a moment, and we're going to take a look at the thickest armor on the tank, which is 80 millimeters thick. Now, 80 millimeters thick is incredibly strong. A KV-1, the tier 5 heavy tank, gets 75 millimeters of armor. And you know how troll that armor can be even when you're shooting at it with tier 5 or even tier 6 guns. Well, this is a tier 3 light tank with armor that's better than a KV-1. So the armor profile is pretty much most of the front of the tank is 80 millimeters thick. The traditional weak lower glacis that experienced players would end up shooting, yep, that's 80 millimeters thick, and it is angled. The lower plate, again, a traditional weak spot in a lot of tanks, 80 millimeters thick. Oh, flat frontal armor, nope, 80 millimeters thick. Flat armor around the turret, nope, that's 80 millimeters thick and is hidden behind spaced armor as well. And even the commander's hatch, the traditional weak spot on most tanks, is 80 millimeters thick. So yeah, this thing is incredibly well armored from the front. And even experienced players looking for weak spots, shooting at the lower glacis or the commander's cupola, are going to suddenly find out that they can't pen it from the front. So on failing to pen the tank from the front, a lot of players might decide to go for the viewports, which is another traditional weak spot on the front of tanks. but the viewports also happen to be 70 millimeters thick. A lot of tanks are going to have problems penning this from the front, and if it has 80 and 70 millimeters of frontal armor, can you imagine how tall that armor is when it's actually angled? So an experienced player playing this tank is going to know how to angle this armor, and good luck trying to pen it from the front. Apparently, there's 60 millimeters of armor somewhere on the tank, but I haven't been able to see or find it, but we'll just continue with the armor profile. It only has 50 millimeters of turret armor. However, I did say that the turret was hidden by spaced armor, so unless you're very, very lucky and are able to sneak a shot into either of these sides, and I think that would be quite difficult, and there's also a good chance of those shots bouncing, trying to pen the 50 millimeters of armor just to the sides of the spaced armor on the gun shield or gun mantlet is, yeah, I'd say you're wasting your time. However, that 50 millimeters of armor also extends to the sides and to the rear of the tank. Now, there are lots and lots of tier 2s and tier 3 tanks that have guns that are capable of penning more than 50 millimeters of armor. And even if you can't pen 50 millimeters of armor, you can always try shooting HE or premium ammo. But if you do want to take out a Pz.II J, one of your best bets is to get to the sides and to the rear, where it is only 50 millimeters thick. And I say only 50 millimeters thick. I mean, there are a lot of guns that will be able to pen a Pz.II J from the side and rear, but there are also a lot of tanks and guns in tier 2 and tier 3 that aren't going to be able to pen a Pz.II J from the side and to the rear. So yeah, even the side and rear armor can be effective, and it can actually be angled. But there's still more good news, because if you can get to the sides and rear, and you can aim for these hatches, these side hatches on both sides of the tank, these hatches are only 40 millimeters thick. Now, there are probably very few tanks in the game that have less than 40 millimeters of penetration with any of their ammo choices at tier 2 and tier 3. So worst case scenario, try and shoot it in the hatches to the either side. There's also more good news, because a lot of this tank is only 25 millimeters thick. So if you do come up against one of these tanks, you're in an autoloader that only has about 25 millimeters of penetration, it's still not a lost cause, because even though the back of the tank is extremely well armored for the most part, if you're shooting down on the back of the tank is only going to be 25 millimeters thick. The roof of the tank is only 25 millimeters thick, and even if you are directly behind them, you can still see that this is slightly angled, and just having a slightly higher tank, you may be able to get some shots in here. Frontally, you can also see that there are some areas of 25 millimeter armor that are exposed. You can see that the turret roof is angled, so again, if you're in another tank, a tall tank, and you can shoot down at this strip on the top of the turret, you probably will be able to pen some shots. Also, the upper plate on this tank is only 25 millimeters thick, and again, if you are face hugging, unfortunately not a good position to be in, but if you have the gun depression and can shoot down on the 25 millimeters of armor here, you will actually be able to do some damage frontally. The other good news is, if you're using a tank with a derp gun, this is where you want to aim. So if you're playing, for example, a T18, then yeah, or maybe a T82, you can probably pen the sides and rear, but you do want to try and hit this strip, or maybe the top of the turret if you're going to be firing HE. So there are ways to take down the Pz.II J, and it's not as scary as a lot of people think, mainly because they're not familiar with playing against it. But it does have weak spots. It may have fantastic frontal armor, but you do have weak spots, mainly to the side, mainly to the rear. So while the armor on a Pz.II J is incredibly good, especially in the hands of an experienced player who knows how to angle and side scrape, it's not invincible. And I think one of the advantages the Pz.II J gets is the fact not that it's incredibly well armored, but the fact that it's incredibly rare. And as a result, a lot of players are going to be aiming at weak spots that would be weak spots on pretty much every other tank in the game, but aren't weak spots on a Pz.II J. So let's get back to this replay, and I hope that venomkiller doesn't get too annoyed with me by giving away all the Pz.II J's weak spots and secrets. If you look at the teams, he is top tier in a tier 3 game on Himmelsdorf, but when you look down the list of tanks on the enemy team, most of those tanks would be able to penetrate the side and rear of a Pz.II J with absolutely no problems. A lot of those tanks have derp guns. They would have no problems penning a Pz.II J, and because it only has 25mm of roof and engine deck armor, basically the top of the tank is only 25mm thick, RT can do severe damage to this tank if it can land a shot on top of it. So pretty much most of the tanks on the enemy team do have the capability of penning and damaging a Pz.II J, but I think the biggest advantage this tank gets is the fact it's rare, and as I say, most players, even experienced players, don't play against this tank often enough to understand that it can be defeated. It may be scary, but it's not as scary as they think. So here we go. So to balance out this armor on the Pz.II J, it gets a really poor gun. You can see it carries 400 rounds of ammunition, but it only has a 20mm that only has 23mm of penetration. Now, 11 alpha damage is okay, and you can see it's also an autoloader, so it can pump out the damage quite quickly if it comes up against lightly armored targets, but the standard AP on this tank is only 23mm of penetration. The APCR, the gold or premium ammo, has 46mm of penetration. So most Pz.II J drivers carry a lot of gold, and I'm surprised. Venomkiller's carrying a lot, but not as much as I've seen some people. So with his regular AP, he is still able to go through the side of an LTP. But now the LTP is angled and is coming at him frontally, and he can't pen with his regular AP. But he's being very aggressive. He's just moved up to the front, and he needs to get the LTP to the side. He is never going to pen an LTP to the front. So you see the reload is actually very good. It's under 3 seconds. But he's bouncing shots. Bouncing lots and lots of shots. And he's taken a hit. A T-18 has penned him in the side as he drove across the gap. So he has switched to premium ammo. Put a whole clip into that T-26. And now he's again advancing across the gap, but no fire coming in from his side. He's going to be trying to take on these tanks. These tanks will have no problems penning him. But the Su-76 doesn't fire. He's got side shots into an LTP. T-18s, he's going to have problems penning from the front, but not if he aims at their weak spots. And there he goes. He's putting shots into their weak spots. And he gets shots into their side. Another T-18, and he's angled. He comes around the corner. He's shooting at the weak spots. Sets that T-18 on fire. Again, got side and rear shots on an LTP. And sets the LTP on fire. So he's on 3 kills. He's taken 21 hits so far, 630 damage. And tanks, rather than trying to run away, rather than trying to get to the side and rear, they are just trying to hit him and kill him frontally. This is what I think the Pz.II J's greatest strength is. The fact that enemy players are just too inexperienced to take it out. But he's on 4 kills already, 713 damage, and has taken 23 hits. Only 2 penetrating hits taken, both to the sides. And you can see that it's not exactly a fast tank. His maximum speed is around 25 kilometers an hour. And that's on very, very favorable ground. So you get this thing into marshy ground, it is incredibly slow. But only 2 tanks left on the enemy team. They were both last spotted on the hill. And they've thankfully come down to deal with him. So again, Valentine AT, no problems going through the front of his tank. We'll pause it there. He takes out, or Pz.II takes out the Valentine AT, but he just took a hit from the Valentine, and I'm going to see where it penned. The Valentine had more than enough penetration to go through the front of his tank, through the thickest armor. So TDs are going to have no problems going through this tank frontally as long as it's not angled. And if you're not in a TD, just get to its side and rear. But 832 damage, 4 kills, 1 enemy tank left. Last spotted on the hill. And we're going to speed it up till something happens because his team are capping, and the T60 appears, and you can see again he's run out of premium ammo. He's firing regular AP and can't penetrate the T60 from the front. So it's a really, really powerful tank, but really there's no need to be scared of them. If you know where to aim and you know how to get to its side and rear, you're not going to have too much trouble dealing with Pz.II Js. So I'd like to thank venomkiller for sending in that replay. It was great to feature a tank that is so rare, that I don't own, and really a lot of players don't see a lot of. It's a very, very scary tank, folks, but it is not invincible. He finished up with a 3rd class badge for that game, came top on XP with 767, 832 damage and 4 kills. Now the fact it was only a 3rd class badge with 767 XP coming first shows you how much of a monster this tank can be. Players obviously play it very, very well. He fired 166 shots, hit 138, but only managed to pen 73. So the penetration on the standard AP is really, really bad, but there are still tanks you can pen with it. But he ended up firing all of his 100 premium shots, so quite a lot of premium ammo expended. 832 damage was nice. He received 27 hits and bounced 23 of them. In fact, I think he bounced 24 of them. I think he only took 3 damaging hits. One hit was absorbed by his tracks. But that's how good the armor is frontally, simply because enemy tanks did not try to get to his side and rear. So he damaged 8, destroyed 4, and made a loss. He wasn't playing with a premium account, but even if he was playing with a premium account, it would still have been a loss. 100 premium shots cost him 40,000 credits. So this is not a tank that you play in order to make money in. It's a tank you play just to have fun in and basically go trolling. But it was his first game of the day. He picked up a ×2, leaving him on 1534 XP. So once again, venomkiller, thank you very much for sending that in. Really, really enjoyed seeing a Pz.II J in action. And I hope you guys learned something as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.